at the prudent factors come together, you said you can't think of an analogy in the financial world. I think that's when prudent financial decisions are made based on a misunderstanding. Which is similar to what you're saying.
Prudent financial decisions made on this. Maybe. It doesn't feel quite the same to me, but maybe.
Hello? Martin, I'm referring to your Agile fluency model. Is it fair to say that when teams that have become quite institutionalized with predictive methods undergo some degree of performance drop when they start to adopt and move through the Agile fluency model?
Yeah, well, that's true when learning any new technique. But usually you'll see a drop in performance as you learn the new technique, as you begin to take it on board, then you'll improve again. It's something I often use the term an improvement ravine. Right? You start improving, you drop for a while, and then you come back up again. And that's true with almost anything when you learn to do something. It's kind of a fundamental thing of change. It's also referred to as the Satir change model, the work of Virginia Satir. And it's one of those things you have to learn to get through, because it's such a common feature. And it helps, I think, once you've been through it a few times, and you get familiar with the fact, oh, I will get this drop-off effect, and you realise it's part of the learning process. For teams that have got very stuck and have not made much change, it's something they have to be kind of coached through. You say, yeah, you will see that drop-off come initially. It will be a bit of a while as you absorb the ideas, but you'll get to a better point once you've got through it. And then you need the patience to push through that. It's why change is hard, because very rarely you don't get some kind of significant drop-off for a while. And that will always, obviously, be a deterrent to change.
I was curious, we've heard a lot about developers and testers and even a bit about managers, but your 4-tier things seem to imply that systems integration might get to play in the Agile space as well. And I'm just curious if you can point us to any resources as how traditional SI teams would fit into the Agile space.
Well, I mean, a lot of I get involved, what Thoughtworks get involved in is building new applications, but that always involves a good bit of system integration. I mean, it's hardly ever that we build an application that hasn't got to integrate with existing systems. And yes, we find Agile approaches do work very well with that. We integrate in piecemeal. What do we need at this particular point in order to build what we're going to do for the next month or so? What pieces of integration do we need at different points? It does get tougher because if other teams aren't able to operate in a similar fast-moving style, the lead time for doing these things gets to be awkward and get very much in the way. But again, if you've got a group that's able to operate in that kind of way, that can be an effective way to go through it. I know exactly what you mean by system integrations projects, I'm not entirely sure, because as I said, we do integration all the time. But Agile, if I sort of step back a moment, Agile, I'm not saying Agile is the right answer for every kind of project. I was talking about this yesterday. I said the thing that pushes you towards wanting to use Agile is where you've got uncertainty or known fluidity in requirements and what you've got to deal with, which is, of course, very common in our industry. The biggest barrier to Agile is actually not a technical thing at all, it's usually a cultural thing. If you've got an organizer, Agile requires a degree of openness and transparency within an organization for it to work effectively. If you've got an organization that hasn't got that attribute, then that is what we've found from our involvements in Agile adoption, that is the biggest barrier. And those two things, of course, are independent. Because you have a lot of situations where, yes, you've got uncertain requirements, but also an organisation that isn't able to operate in a transparent way. And of course, integration often exacerbates that, because then you're often integrating with separate organisations or separate companies, and again, getting transparency across those boundaries becomes a lot more difficult. But that is the biggest barrier that we see. It's a cultural one, not necessarily one based on technology.
Hey, my question pretty much is related to what you just said. So you said very few organizations reach the third star in the Agile fluency model. So you've essentially got situations where you've got a pocket of agility in a larger non-agile organization. So how do you reconcile that with the ability to refactor, etc.? So I mean, if you're saying you want to deliver value every increment, every 2 weeks, every whatever, but the wider organization doesn't understand the necessity to refactor, to redesign, etc., etc. How do you reconcile those two forces?
Well, I mean, often within those pockets, you're still able to do that kind of thing, because within that particular business unit or group, they appreciate the ability to get new features into production very rapidly. I mean, that's why we've put such a strong emphasis on continuous delivery. Once people get used to the fact that they can get new features and put into production in cycle times of a week, that's a very compelling thing for a lot of business units. And they want that. And that can maintain that bubble of agility even in an organisation that broadly isn't. I also make the point that most projects that most enterprises do don't need to be agile. They don't need to be particularly good. Because most IT within most organisations is what I call utility IT. Right? In which case, they don't want it to be expensive, they want it to work, they don't want it to have a serious breakdown, but the fact that it's better than their competitors is kind of irrelevant. I mean, the canonical example would be payroll, right? If your payroll process is really, really good, is that really helping your competitive advantage in the marketplace? For most organisations, no. So in that kind of situation, you don't have to worry about all of these kinds of things that I'm talking about. What matters is areas where it is line up with your competitive advantage. That's when it makes a difference to say, yes, we're more efficient in this area, we can do better software, etc., etc. And the problem is, people think that the two styles, the utility software and what I call the strategic software, they have to be managed the same way. And they don't need to be managed the same way. You should in fact use different management processes, because what counts is different in the two cases. And the importance is to recognise that there's two different styles going on here. And also to realise that, and conscious of the fact that the strategic software is a much smaller proportion. It is perhaps 20%, 10% of what software is going on. But it has to be done differently, because it's playing a different role within an organisation's work.
Hello.
My question is with regard to the maturity of Agile in the organization. Is that maturity looked at as an organization level, team level, function level, or because from what you described, we have the skill sets to be 2-star in a particular project or in a particular function, but 1-star on organizational level and so on. Cost-cutting measure, or is it just not? Is there a way you can quantify or measure there?
So the question is, do these star levels of fluency operate at the team or organisational-wide level? I would have to double-check what it says in the article. So if my memory is faulty on me, believe the article, not me. But I would say certainly at 1- and 2-star levels, you're only talking about team, usually. To some extent, as you move, part of the move into the 3- and 4-star levels is thinking a bit more broadly in terms of an organisation. So the answer, unfortunately, it depends on which level you're talking about. But as I say, double check on the original article, so I may well have that wrong.
diminishing returns for dealing with accidental complexity, and what are some of the big things on your horizon, both methodology and technology-wise?
Are we reaching a point of diminishing? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question, I guess.
What I mean by that is, imagine that you are a 4-star fluent agile organization. At this point, have we dealt with most of the accidental complexity?
I have no idea. I've never seen a 4-star agile organisation. I don't know what one looks like. To be honest, I don't. I mean, it's their speculative idea of what one might look like is what's in the paper, but they said they've not seen one either, so we don't really know, right? That's speculation.
Right, but the percentage figures in your slide between 1, 2, 3, and 4 stars sort of alluded to that.
I don't, I'm sorry, you've lost the fair, I'm afraid.
I read your article on evolutionary design. I actually found it quite interesting. Has anything changed since you last written that article? I mean, is there value in actually having evolutionary design? I tried selling it in my project. I was shocked for doing that. So has anything changed? I mean, in terms of evolutionary design with respect to architecture and that kind of stuff, is it still applicable?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Evolutionary design is an important part of the skill in doing Agile. You've got to be able to look at design in an evolutionary sense, because otherwise you're not going to be able to handle the changes, the requirements, the adaptability that you need to have. So, yes, I mean, evolutionary design is still very, very important. If you go to the design page on my website, one of the things it points to is a video course that my colleague Neil Ford has done on evolutionary design. If you want more details, that's a good place to go for more, because he made quite a good effort in talking about the various techniques that we're needing to do in a good bit more detail than my article, which is, I assume the one you mean is Design Dead, which I wrote a good 10 years or so ago. And I think that article's still valid. I haven't sat down to try and say, okay, what would I say now to see what's different or not, but I don't think there's any gaping holes in it that I'm aware of.
Morning, Martin. My understanding of your concept of technical debt is a way of motivating the need for doing things like refactoring, keeping your code base clean. But is it actually valuable to a development team to keep something like maybe a to-do list, something like that, as visible indication of the known technical debt that you've taken on already?
Yeah, I think that's a number of teams do that. They have areas where they can try and flag bits of technical debt. And I think that's a useful thing to do. I think the decision what to do about them then comes down to this principle versus interest. How much is it hurting us as we do new features versus how much effort would it take to pull down? And that's the kind of assessment that you then need to make. And that's, of course, a tricky assessment. It's a qualitative trade-off. But that, I think, is a useful route to go to work with that. I think it's also important to get in. The most important thing within a team is the habit of continual refactoring and improvement. It's what a lot of people refer to as the Boy Scout rule. Whenever you go through a piece of code, leave it better than when you came into it. And encouraging and getting a culture of doing that. It's amazing how often I run into teams where they say, well, yeah, this is messy, we should improve it, but you know, it's not the culture around here to go in and clean up bits of code that are already there. And you know, I think that needs to be a continuous theme of that. When I look at the better teams, they very aggressively do that. They'll go through and, you know, you're working on some piece of code over here and you're making some use of an API over there, and you look at that API and you say, that API is not very clear, or it's not structured in the way I need to do it. I'm going to go in and fix it, and I'm going to spend a bit of time to do that as part of working over here. And that's accepted as normal. And good teams will be doing that, and it helps to keep the code base in good health.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Martin.